oh, you can be an entrepreneur inside of a company. You can make a lot of change just where you are. Even if you start within a company, you can have a huge impact.
So I first want to start off by thanking WashU and the Skandalaris Center for making this live interview possible and giving us the space and the opportunity to make this happen. I also want to thank everyone for being here. For those of you watching at home, we're going to watch it on YouTube. We have a live audience here, and it's our first live event, so I'm excited to get this done. And finally, here with Cynthia Brinkley, also known as Cindy, and I really want to thank you for being here and helping promote our mission of getting free career advice to young adults from industry leaders. And as you may know, not every young adult has the amazing opportunity to sit in front of someone like yourself who has such a diverse and accomplished career path. So I really want to thank you for being here. And yeah.
Thank you for having me, Shane. We're looking forward to this.
Of course. So in preparation for this interview, I was looking at your resume, and you've just done so much and have such a diverse career, as I was saying. So first, I want to start off by tell us how you define your career, and then we can talk about a little bit about your roles now.
Well, again, it's a pleasure to be here. When I think about how I define my career, it's been predominantly in corporate. I mean, I've been in the corporate world for 30 plus years in 3 different industries, telecommunication, automotive, as well as healthcare / insurance. And so I would define myself as being a seasoned corporate executive, senior corporate executive that's had the privilege, I think, of working in industries going through phenomenal change. A lot of it driven by technology, a lot of it doing just the changing dynamics of the market, some based out of General Motors. When I was there, that was post-bankruptcy, so it was a Phoenix Rising. With Centene Corporation, it was a very, very fast-growing company with a CAGR of 35% annual for over 10 years. So it was almost, as we call it, like a rocket ship. So having that experience in, the telecom, automotive, and healthcare has been, quite a privilege for me and actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, and I know you've had more linear jobs, but now you have what you would describe as a portfolio career. Can you tell me about what that means and what you're doing?
Yeah, so linear, I'm not at the office every day at 7 and staying until whenever and having, quarterly calls with investors and all of that. So now I have what I call is a portfolio career. I sit on corporate boards for which I'm paid, and then I also volunteer a lot of time through nonprofit organizations.
So what boards do you sit on?
So the boards that I currently sit on are Ameren, which is an investor-owned utility, and I also sit on Energizer, which is a consumer packaged goods, the bunny. Many of you are familiar with the bunny. And I also sit on Schnucks Markets, which is a regional grocery store. And so I sit on those 3, and I chair the Human Resource Committee for all 3 of those boards, and I also sit on nominating and governance for the 2 public boards.
What do you like most about sitting on those boards?
They're all 3 very different. Interestingly, during COVID, all 3 were deemed essential. So all 3, from the obviously utility to the batteries that Energizer does and all the other, products, as well as, with groceries, obviously. So they're all 3 different. They all 3 have a big impact on what's going on in the world right now. Energizer is a very, very international company. And so I think just having that kind of experience and that variety of experience, it's very interesting.
Yeah, I know you haven't had a very linear career path, but for people or young adults aspiring to work their way up to companies and become C-suite executives, what do you think the best path is for them to take?
A lot of times people say, what do you want to do? I would say, first of all, kind of think about what makes you happy. There's this, we used to talk about this a lot at AT&T University. It's almost like there are things that you love to do. You're really good at it, but there's no demand for it. That's probably a hobby, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's things that you're not so good at yet, but you're passionate about it and there's a great demand for it, that's something that's good. You're probably just a rookie, right? And then there's things that you hate doing. There's a huge demand for it, and but you don't like doing it, but you are good at it, but you don't like doing it. That's probably day prison, as we used to call it. So it's finding that sweet spot among those three, that's something that you're good at, that you love doing, and that is needed. And you also have to know that, life changes. I mean, things are going to change, and it's, as I always say, it's not the strongest who survive. It's not the smartest who survive. It becomes very Darwinian. It's those who can adapt. So you can have a very strong skill set and then realize how does that work into this new changing world? And how can, I always ask myself, how can I bring value? What is it that I can contribute, right? Mm-hmm. And so you focus on that. But I don't think it's so much about what is it that you do. I think it's more about what is it that makes you happy. You can make a contribution. Everybody's born with different skills, with different talents, and you shouldn't try to be anybody else but yourself. And you just figure out where that fits, which is not easy, by the way, And early on and throughout, I'd be like, this is not working. And my parents would say, it's just a very good experience. There's no such thing as failure. The only failure is in not trying. And so I'd be like, well, I've kind of had enough of these good experiences right now. I'm ready for one of these to stick. But, you just focus on what it is that makes you happy and where you can use that somewhere.
For sure.
What you're good at.
So can you tell me a little bit about your past jobs and your more linear jobs before you started chairing these really Fortune 500 companies?
Well, first of all, if you would have told me when I was your age that I would be in the corporate world, I would have said, absolutely not. I came from a family of entrepreneurs. My parents were small business people. We grew up in a rural part of the country, and actually in rural Missouri. And my father ran a business and my mother ran a business. My mother was actually she was the first woman on the bank board there in the regional. So come from a long family of entrepreneurs. Today, most of my siblings own their own businesses. So my career, I was originally, and this is kind of how life goes, you think you're going to go one way and then you realize, that you're going to go somewhere else. So I started in what was then Southwestern Bell, which evolved into SBC, and then bought all the baby bells and bought AT&T and changed its name to AT&T. And my original thought was, I'll do this for a couple of years and then I'll probably start my own business. And the interesting thing about that experience and what I was permitted to do over that 25-year trajectory is almost every job I had was newly created. And a lot of that was because we were busy buying companies and we were changing because of technology. The whole business was changing. Back in the day, long before you were born, there was a thing called wireline telephones, believe it or not. And so those were the predominant form of technology. And then as things change, you had wireless. The iPhone was introduced. I mean, everything changed since then. But that industry evolved, and so it presented a lot of opportunities, and it became more and more interesting. So most of the jobs that I had within the company were newly created, and so you could build things. It was like you were, as I call it, an entrepreneur. You were inside of a company, but you were in charge of something brand new that you could build. So in that 25-year career, I had a lot of experiences, a lot in the regulatory legislative, because we were such a regulated company, so you had to get approval to do a lot of it. I did a lot of M&A integration work. I ran different business units, president of the Arkansas organization, president of the Missouri organization as well. And then my last job within the company was we had just acquired Bell South, which gave us all of the old, probably don't remember this company, it's called Singular. and we owned 60% of it, and Dell South owned the other 40%. So we grew into, we had 325,000 employees. So we had a lot. And so the CEO chairman at the time asked me to come. I was here in St. Louis, asked me to move to the corporate headquarters, back to the corporate headquarters, and start a whole new area, which was very different for me. It was all around leadership development, talent development, succession planning, all the training for the company, which was quite an effort, because we had a union workforce. So every 3 years we would have a renegotiation of the contract, so you could have a work stoppage. So you had to get all the management employees ready to go to work and climb poles if you needed to do that. And also start a new university for the company, AT&T University, which was really a lot around culture, because we had put a wireline culture in with the wireless culture, and really focus on talent development. And we had a new, our chairman at the time had just retired, and so we had a new CEO chairman, and really provide a platform for him to communicate. And really, in an organization that large, you had to have a system, had to have a way to identify talent, and you had to have a way to kind of integrate all of these different companies that we had acquired over the last probably 10 years and put them all together. So that was a big opportunity, and we were able to scale to the, I think 100,000 employees just in the first year. Did a lot virtually. We were recognized by having the best learning that integrated business as well as the learning. We moved up. Oh, and I was the chief diversity officer. I was the first chief diversity officer.
The first one?
Mm-hmm. For the company.
I want to talk more about this term, entrepreneur, and it sounds like you made a lot of change at AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
So would you agree that you, in order to be an entrepreneur, you don't need to just start a company? It's a lot more to it.
Oh, you can be an entrepreneur inside of a company. You can make a lot of change just where you are. Even if you start within a company, you can have a huge impact. You can make a lot of change, and you can really drive a lot of impact. I think there's a lot of things that have to come together for that, though, Shane. Number one, you have to have a culture that would support it, a culture that would permit you to come and bring your best self, be your best self, and to really showcase your talents. And it's also recognizing where your talents are and how you're going to drive value. What is it that you bring every day that can drive value for the shareholders, for employees, for everybody? And so that's a lot of what the entrepreneurship within the company is all about.
So I know you said AT&T was your starting point. Can you tell me a little bit how you went from either college, talk about your college experience, and then how you got the opportunity to start at AT&T?
Yeah, so I went to college. I went to the University of Missouri, and I was studying journalism and also political science. And my aspiration at the time was I was going to be a broadcast journalist. I wanted to be, this name means nothing to you, but I wanted to be the next Cokie Roberts, who was a political correspondent. And I thought, you know what, that's going to be great. So that's what I wanted to do. And when I graduated, the job opportunities at the time were you would start in a very, very small market in a very, very cold place. And it's, for very, very low money. And I thought, I'm not sure that I want to do that. And so I moved to Austin, Texas, and had 2 job offers. One was from what was then Southwestern Bell, and the other one was with the American Cancer Society. And I thought, and they were, I think I'll go the corporate route, as I mentioned, just for a couple of years, and 25 years later, and then 2 other companies after that, here I am.
Sounds like it.
So I think sometimes where you think you're going to end up is not where you're going to end up. And it's okay. And I think if somebody has always said, well, how did you get there? Well, number one, I never picked out my next job, because honestly, I found out sometimes that if I did pick that out, I could be limiting myself. I would just think about where can I bring value? What is it that I can bring to this? How can I grow the business? I see this need. I can make this happen. And again, the culture, the people I worked with, I was fortunate that they recognized that, and they would let me kind of go to town and let me do what I wanted to do and where I would fit, which is kind of unusual for a company as large and as old, if you will, in some respects, as an AT&T or a Southwestern Bell at the time.
So I know you also made the shift to GM, actually.
Yeah, I did.
Can you talk a little bit about what made you want to make that shift and how you made that shift to GM?
Yeah, so this is another one of those things that just, I didn't plan on it. I was living in Dallas, Texas, the corporate headquarters for AT&T. I was, running the university and all these programs, and it was all going very well. And one day I get a call from General Motors, and she says, hey, we're interested in you to run our global human resource, function. And I'm like, I'm not a human resource person. I happen to be doing this job, but that's not been my background. And I said, besides, where's the job? And they said, Detroit. I said, absolutely not. We're not going to move to Detroit. I'm in Dallas. It's a little too cold for me there. Anyway, long story short, they called back and they kind of enticed and said, well, this is really not about, we're not looking for a traditional HR person. This is really more about culture change. General Motors, this company that had been around forever, had just gone through bankruptcy, and they were rebuilding. And that was very exciting to me to think about, we're rebuilding this company. It's going to be better than it was before. So I thought, well, I can't hurt to go up and talk. And long story short, I had just become retirement eligible at AT&T. And so I said, you know what, I think I'm going to retire. And I moved to Detroit and became their chief human resource officer. And it was, interestingly, the person I followed, who was Mary Barra, is now the CEO of GM. So she went from head of human resources to head of global product development to then that's the chief executive officer, and, phenomenal person. She's wonderful.
What was your time like at GM, and how did you enjoy it?
Well, with anything, it's a whole new language. And, it was interesting because I came from a culture where, particularly with the wireless, where you have a short product life cycle. Think about a cell phone. You get a new one, right? Every 3 years, and then you toss it and you get it. So it's a short product life cycle. You aren't exactly 100% on everything. You get it 80, 90% and go with it to market, and you move, right? Well, GM was exactly the opposite. It takes 5 years from when you think about a car to when it comes out on the assembly line. So it's a very long product life cycle. The life of a car is very long. I mean, people keep their cars on average at least 10 years now. So you have that. And so you have people, they're employees who truly are rocket scientists. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're brilliant. I mean, these people, and it's an incredibly global company. So most of the employees actually were outside of the United States. So it's a phenomenal company with just great employees. So I had the opportunity to come in and help rebuild the team, benchmark us against best in class, hire a bunch of really great people, and then, there for a couple of years, and then it's time to turn over the reins to the next person. And we made a lot of change during that time, and it was very exciting. And it was, very interesting. Great people there.
And then from GM, you went to Centene.
Well, at GM, I decided I was done with the corporate world. And then I moved to St. Louis, and I like to renovate houses in my spare time. So I bought an older home here and was renovating it. And then I get a call one day from Michael Neidorf, who is the CEO of Centene Corporation. And Centene was a little-known company at the time that Michael, who was quite the entrepreneur and just did a phenomenal job, had really built from 40 million to, at that time, was 20 billion. It had been 15 billion the year before and 20. And so Michael wanted me to come to work, and he knew he was going to buy companies. He knew he was going to grow the business. He knew he was going to do a lot of M&A. And so asked me, and he knew I'd had a lot of experience with that. We were familiar with each other from when I was living in St. Louis before, running AT&T. And so I was very intrigued by the growth of the company, by the mission of the company, which is, if you're familiar with Centene, it provides health care to underinsured. So it's predominantly a Medicaid provider to individuals. So it was the fastest growing part of the healthcare insurance business. And so I came in to run business integration and also their international operations. They had just bought a hospital system in Spain, which was a real testament to a public-private partnership. And so I was going to run that and you're hoping to expand internationally. And then do the business integration. And shortly thereafter, we bought HealthNet in California, which almost doubled our size. And then we bought Fidelis in New York, and then had some other bolt-on. And I moved into the M&A world and into business development, and then moved into the president and chief operating officer role, and then the chief administrative officer role. So basically running the what's called the P&L, the profit and loss for the company. And so I was there for over 4 years, and I was like, okay, I think it's time for another chapter, and retired, stayed on for an additional 4 years to advise on any acquisition. So when I left, we were close to 80 billion. Wow. And then, right now I think the company's at 150.
And at that point, is that when you made your shift over into your portfolio career?
It's when I moved more into portfolio, right? So it's that I was already on 2 corporate boards, and then I joined a third, and that's when I kind of moved into more of a board work, which is also very interesting. Yeah.
So now in your portfolio career, what is a typical day like for you?
Well, it just depends on the day. Some days it's very flexible, and I have a lot of time to pursue just my own personal interests. Other days I might be in 2 days of nonstop meetings when I am. We usually meet quarterly. We have committee meetings during that time. There's usually work that you do during that time. So as a board director, you're not involved in the day-to-day management of the company. What you do is your first job is to hire the CEO, right? And to make sure you've got the right person leading the business, but making sure directionally the company's focused on the right strategy and has the right people to focus on the execution. So it's a lot of strategy. It's a lot of kind of understanding the dynamics of the company. It's keeping watch on the culture of the company and making sure that the culture of the company is such that it can support executing on the strategy.
So you said that you're in charge of hiring CEOs. When you're hiring CEOs and looking for the right CEO, what skills and qualities are you looking for in a person?
Well, it depends on the company. It depends on what's needed, but obviously someone with strong leadership capabilities, someone who's very ethical, someone who's got strong integrity, someone who can lead people, someone that management will want to follow. And so someone who can create the right environment, someone who understands the business or understands how to do the business and can execute on the strategy. So, and surrounds him or herself with the right people in order to make that happen.
And what skills and qualities would you say are essential to succeed as a board member like yourself?
Well, there's, first of all, I think honesty, integrity, a good understanding of business, and recognizing you don't run the business, you oversee and make sure that things happen, but you're not the one responsible to actually run the business. So understanding your role, having a good business sense, understanding how business works, understanding the strategy, understanding the nature of the business, those type things I think are critical.
So you don't come from, you didn't go to college for business and don't come from a background of business. So how did you develop such a good sense of business?
Well, I mean, I did take several courses. I actually could have a minor in economics. I took, basic business classes like finance, accounting, all of those kinds of things in addition to my liberal arts. I love liberal arts degrees because I think it really helps people understand how to think and hopefully learn how to write and learn how to, do all of those skills that are really important because you can learn the others. And it's just like, you learn kind of OJT, as we say, on the job, OTJ rather, and you learn those things, and it's just things that you pick up,
Definitely. And throughout your career, what do you think have been the biggest challenges?
When you go from industry to industry, learning the language, because each business, each industry has, telecom, it's one way, automobiles has been another one, healthcare has been another. So learning language is important.
How do you think you learn those languages fairly quickly?
Well, you ask a lot of questions and you pay close attention, and hopefully there's always such knowledgeable people in the business, and you really try, and you recognize that you will never be what they are. Someone who actually grew up in the business, you will never have that kind of expertise having just come into it. But hopefully by working with everybody, everybody's incredibly generous. You just become a student. It's no different than, when you're in college and you're learning all the various subjects that you have to learn. You pay close attention and you do it. You try to immerse yourself and to learn as much as you can. So I think, understanding the businesses has always been, a focus and an opportunity and a challenge. When you working with people, you realize, particularly if you're running your own business or if you're working within a business, you're not a party of one. And so you work with other people and getting results through other people and understanding what motivates people and how to work with them. I mean, some people, as we used to say, are clearly coin operated. It's all about the incentive pay. Other people, pat on the back. Other people, it's, providing new and exciting opportunities. So, when you're in business, regardless, you have to be part psychologist as well because you get results through people, or if you're selling, you got to understand how your customers think. And so that's always a challenge, regardless of where you are.
Is there a memorable challenge or adversity that you had to overcome?
Oh, yeah. Let me think about this. There was early in my career, I was living in Austin, Texas, and again, you're not going to believe this actually happened, but back in the day, you didn't have caller ID. Okay. So you know what that is? So when your name or number comes up on the screen, like on your phone, that used to not exist. So there was a new service that was being introduced that we were trying to introduce in Texas called caller ID. Well, it was actually an illegal trap and trace device, believe it or not. So we had to go to the legislature in order to get it approved before we could even offer it. And before we could do that, we had to convince corporate, and corporate at the time was here in St. Louis, that we needed to change our policy. And this is so foreign to, I'm sure, students watching to understand that there was actually this kind of process back in the day where law enforcement and domestic violence were very much opposed to that because it could reveal identities, which could be very, it can be very harmful to people.
Definitely.
So I discovered this as a very low-level manager that when I started to go and talk to outside groups, and Texas at the time was our largest market, so this was going to be very important to us. So we had to first of all I had to convince my bosses that we needed to change this big policy, and then we had to convince the higher corporate powers, if you will, that we had to change the policy. And that was quite a feat. And then we had to testify or get the state law changed. And I was the one chosen to testify before the legislature. And so as a young...
Question really quick. Sorry to interrupt you. How did you stay so persistent in doing all of that?
Because I felt like it's the right thing to do. And so I felt like it made a lot of sense. And I felt like I would be negligent by not doing that and not raising the issue and not trying to persuade our own company that they needed to change their policy. And then we had to persuade, after that happened, finally, then we had to persuade the Texas legislature basically to approve it and get us, authorize us to be able to get permission from the Public Utility Commission in order to do it. So being grilled by a senator for several hours was a new experience and a challenge, and not one that I expected. And so we were ultimately successful on that, but it was a different experience, and one that, candidly, I was like, I think this is above my pay grade. But it was an interesting, and it gave me a lot of great experience.
So you worked in a lot of different industries. How do you identify industry changes as they come along?
Technology plays a big role in that, and you can see it very, very clearly in terms of what's going on. Understanding demographics and what's happening and where people are headed makes a big difference as well, and trying to get ahead of those kinds of things. For example, at General Motors, we actually partnered with MTV because, younger individuals at the time, it was more Gen Xers, millennials weren't quite there yet, but they didn't want to buy a car and didn't want to own a car. So how do we, that's a big deal, right? If you're in an auto company and you look down the pipeline and you see that what you're seeing is they don't want cars, and this was even before Uber. And so trying to understand those dynamics and to see what would be the right kind of answer to those kinds of things. So that's an example of one of the things that we look at all the time. Technology is a huge disruptor, and you see it all the time. And it can, as someone who loves technology and love how it does that, you can have a lot of opportunities with that as well.
How has AI affected your industries?
Well, everybody's paying very, very close attention to it. It's one of those where, it can do a lot of really great things, and then there's kind of scary thinking, how is this going to impact it? So we know it's going to impact each of the industries that I do. I mean, it's helped a lot in terms of gaining efficiencies, gaining some momentum, using it to really, just be a lot more efficient. But it can also, you can use it for things that, fraud and things, you can worry about things like that for the energy grid. You can worry about things, in various other industries. So yes, we're just paying very close attention to it. I don't think anybody has the exact answer yet, except, don't ignore it. That's for sure.
Cindy, you've given a lot of really good and strong advice throughout our conversation, but I want to ask you, what final piece of advice do you want to leave people watching with?
Oh gosh. Well, you know what, Shane? I think it's just that. I think you should think about who you are, where you can bring value, what makes you, what excites you, what makes you happy, and where there's a demand for it, and try to make all that come together. And just recognize you're going to change, things are going to change, and this sounds so cliche to say it. I dread saying it, but just be a constant learner. Can always be ready to learn and change and adapt and bring your best self.
For sure. Well, that's all the questions I have for you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Once again, I really want to thank you for coming and promoting our mission of getting free career advice to young adults all across the nation.
Well,
you've had a really cool story and some really good advice for young adults, and I hope they watch your video. And now we're going to open it up to a Q&A for everyone in the audience right now, if anyone has any questions.
Yeah. What's the biggest life flexi that you always score them by?
That's a great question. So I think one of the biggest life lessons that really is good to focus on is treat other people well. And you'll find throughout your career that if you are the kind of person you want who you are, because you can't be a leader without followers. And nobody wants to follow somebody who's doesn't have their best interests at heart. So I would say always treat people well, treat them with respect, try to understand where they're coming from. I mean, I'm not saying don't stand up for who you are, but just remember kind of what goes around comes around, and you will be remembered by being that kind of person versus, oh, so-and-so was so smart, or so-and-so was so creative, or so-and-so. Yeah, but really they'll remember how you made them feel.
Good. For young adults coming out of college, when you would do hiring and review lots of talent, what would be unique to you that you would be looking for?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We were at AT&T. We had at the time the #1 leadership development program. So we had a lot of great candidates with whom we'd pick, and I mean some stellar individuals. And what I would look for, and what my team would look for, is good grades. Yes, I didn't care if you were a straight A student. I didn't want you to be a C student, right? But what I really cared was, how did you distinguish yourself? Were you a leader? Were you involved in extracurricular activities? Did you do something? Did you start something that distinguishes you, to where I could look at you and I'd say, you know what? This person knows how to lead. This person is smart. This person is assertive. And I would get individuals who were just so focused on the academics, they didn't really have anything else. And they would not be someone that we would hire, because I need to see that these individuals are leaders, that they can lead. They're creative. They think outside the box. They've solved problems. And that's what I looked for.
And would you also be able to comment on things you would look for, like interview tips, people who would be fortunate to come forward?
Yeah. So #1, this is basic. Be on time. Show up on time. Have eye contact. We were talking earlier about a colleague several of us knew, who we'd be in meetings with this individual, and they were constantly looking at their iPhone. So don't be on your phones. I know that sounds very simplistic. Eye contact, be prompt, posture, little things. Who are you saying you are? So those kinds of things. Try and just convey who you really are, and not what you think the answer should be. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask questions. And remember, when you're interviewing, you're being interviewed, but you should know you're also interviewing them. Ask about their culture. Ask about how are they successful here? Tell me what it looks like to be successful. What would I do to get to the next level? What would I be expected to do? So this is a two-way, okay? I would also tell you, I know you guys all know this, but your social media profiles, those are checked, right? So if you have something on here you don't want your prospective employer to see, you might want to remove it. So your face, whatever you have on, just know when a company is looking at a prospective employee, and particularly somebody that we would want in a leadership position. Because if you're going to a school like Washington University, whatever, that's the kind of, you're looking for leaders. So come across as a leader. Okay?
Good.
And there's a question back there.
Yeah. Question. So not getting the idea yet. So what encourage you were to pitch to someone that someone was fresh to the job, not doing the job?
What kind of advice would I give to someone who's fresh or new to the job market?
Yeah, nothing that you don't.
Well, number one, what a great playground you have before you, because you've got this whole new thing. Having said that, it's a different dynamic, and it's different to know kind of what I would really look at. I mean, again, it's a two-way street. You need to think about what it is. Don't try to pigeonhole yourself into one thing, but be open to a lot of different opportunities.
No.
And it's okay to try out a company and decide, that's not for me. I mean, it's okay. You don't have to stay there forever, but just, be open to it and ask the right questions and do your research on the company. That's the other thing. When you come into a company, know something about it, understand what their challenges are, what their opportunities could be, and don't wait to be spoon-fed, and kind of take the initiative to say, hey, I noticed your sales were down 5% over last year, or whatever it might be. What was the reason for that? Or, just engage in the business, and don't be shy about asking questions. So do your research and all that. I don't know. I hope that answered your question. Okay.
And you don't funny. Should this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you again for coming out today. Great conversation. To a lot of place. I'm just curious, you could tell yourself, say your 20-year-old self, like looking way back, is there anything that you wish you could have done differently, or something that you would tell?
Another great question. Don't be so hard on yourself, number one. I mean, you and just I've actually thought about that, because I admittedly, there's hard work goes a long way, and when you're in a company and you're building your career and you move up quickly, it's because you're working very hard, for one thing. Okay, so I would just say, make sure you have a balance, work hard. But don't be so hard on yourself, and just know if it's going to be okay, and you can do a lot of things. But I said this at the beginning, think about what it is that really makes you happy, and what you're good at, and where you can sit, and where you can bring value. But yeah, and try new things. Don't, I was eager to go to work, as soon as I graduated, and retrospect, it should have been great to have a gap year, right? And travel. But, of course I didn't do that. Well, and one, I needed to work. I had to, right? But I mean, just think about, where you can bring value, and just don't be as hard on yourself. Yeah.
For a student in college who's incurring their first job, and in this world that's a lot of remote work, and you talked a lot about building cultures within corporations, the students face with, they want to climb the ladder to be successful like you were, but you never dealt with starting with remote work. It wasn't a thing, then it's a thing that's come over the last couple of years. What is your feelings on that? If I'm with students starting out, do I take the remote job? Am I at an advantage, disadvantage, or are you neutral? What is your feelings on the remote work?
Yeah, that's a, remote work, that's a great question. If you're new to your career, you're trying to build it, I would not do remote work. I mean, because people don't know you. They don't get to know you. They might know your work and know you're really great and smart, but you don't get a chance to build those relationships. I know someone who's in a job, and it's a remote job, and she is an extrovert, and she needs that interaction. And it's a real struggle to be able to really feel like you're bringing value. The other thing that it can be a real challenge at is learning from others, because you learn so much. I've had great mentors. I've had mentors, people didn't even know they were my mentors. I mean, they didn't know. They didn't meet with me. I just watched them and learned from them, but they were clearly a mentor. I had composite mentors, meaning, everybody, you'll notice people always have at least one skill that they're really good at. So I would kind of build my own composite mentor and take, well, that person is good at this person is good at that. And I'd watch all that. And oftentimes if you're in a remote working situation, you don't get that. So it's almost like, because after you get on the job, you learn a lot. You're going to learn more at work. I'm sure you're learning a lot at Washington University, but I can guarantee you're going to likely learn more once you get on the job. So you lose out on that. And if that's something that's important to you and you have to ask yourself where do you want to, what you're trying to do, I'm just not a big fan of remote work when you're trying to build your career internally. I don't think it's a long-term good value, good way to do it. So, yeah.
The question is kind of about the entrepreneur thing. What advice would you have for someone who's an aspiring entrepreneur, someone who's trying to make change happen wherever they are?
Yeah, that's another. Well, number one, you got to recognize where you can bring value. So knowing your skill set, knowing where you fit, seeing an opportunity. It's no different than seeing an opportunity like your external trying to build a business, right? Your customers, you see, it's the same thing, only internally. So knowing where that exists. The other thing is, how do you do it? So you have to do a lot of that through working with other people. So, understanding the people with whom you worked, how does change happen? And, this is another, the question earlier about when you're interviewing, you can ask. So if I'm interested in really being a dynamic member of this team and really helping grow the business, is the culture receptive to good ideas? I'm sure everybody will say yes, but then you say, well, can you give me an example where that's happened? Or is there anybody I can talk to within the company that's been able to do that? So recognizing how to do that, and that's where the psychology comes in that I told you about, because you can't just say, everybody do this. You have to build support, and you have to get buy-in, and it's not easy. If it's no different than externally, you got to get funders, you got to get people, it's the same kind of skill set, but it can be done, and it can be really exciting. But again, that corporate culture and making sure that it supports that kind of initiative is really important. Or if it's like, no, we don't need to hear your ideas, you go over there and go sit in your cube and count paper clips. That's probably not where you want to be. Yeah.
What's some of those stellar characteristics that you have that you think got you to where you are?
Well, I'm a relentless worker, so I work very hard. I think I'm pretty good with people, leading people. I think I'm pretty good at implementing change and getting people to kind of come along to all of that. And I've been a good problem solver, recognizing how to solve things, and a good communicator. So I think those are probably. I'd have to look at my last 360 and tell you guys what it was. I don't know. So yeah, but that's. I think those are the skills that I have brought to various. Yeah.
Hey, Sydney, thanks for being here. My question is regarding being a young person, whether you're an entrepreneur or in a large corporation, trying to overcome assumptions that you may bring less value than more experienced people. What would be your advice to someone who's young who wants a seat at the table with more experienced folks and proving that they have the knowledge and value to do so?
Well, I think one of the first things to that is making sure the older people there that you recognize their value. So you're not coming in saying, you guys don't know anything, I know it all. It's the whole psychology thing again. So that you recognize the value that they bring,
Yeah,
and what they have brought, And, I think a lot of it, you can be like the constant learner and, coming up with ideas and sharing those and being the problem solver, being someone who's focused on the business, trying to do what's right for the business and move it along. People recognize that. And anymore, I would argue, care how old you are. I mean, if you have good answers, if you have good solutions, and particularly, around technology or around even, this is what I'm of this age group. I know how they think. That's very, very valuable. So don't think that you can't have a seat at the table. Just know it may take a little bit to earn that seat, because you have to earn that seat and you have to prove that you understand what's going on. You recognize the value. It's about being very sustainable in the organization. Yeah, it's a good question.
Good question.
Any more questions? If there's no more questions, I just want to say once again, thank you, WashU and the Skandalaris Center, for making this possible. And thank you, Cindy, for being here.
Thank you, Shane. It's good.
Pardon?
Thank you.